Welcome to the Top Agent Happy Hour podcast, where you'll learn how to build a real estate career worth celebrating. Join us as real estate's top producers, industry insiders, and team leaders pull back the curtain, sharing secrets and actionable ideas for attracting clients, delivering great service, and closing deals. You'll also go beyond the deal, learning how to connect with your why, be authentically awesome, and build your will to win. And now let's join your real estate rock star hosts from Pearson Smith Realty, Richard Bridges and Dustin Fox.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another exciting, action-packed episode of Top Agent Happy Hour. I'm your host, Richard Bridges. This week, Dustin Fox has very much so earned his week off. He's with his family, loving up on them, doing some beach time. But nonetheless, we have a super exciting special guest with us on the Top Agent Happy Hour, Rob Whitman, the Director of Growth with Dutco Reagan, Keller Williams' top team. And we couldn't be more excited to have you on the show just because of how much knowledge and how much you've experienced in the real estate industry. Rob, can you take a minute just to tell us who you are, what you're about, anything we should know about Rob Whitman?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I'm really excited. This is my first podcast, so take it easy on me. But I'm an associate broker currently here at Keller Williams on our Dutco Reagan Homes and Investments team. I've been in the business for about 15 years now. I have had almost every job in real estate except for property management, which I don't think I would ever undertake personally. Just seems like a lot of stress. But I've been a transaction coordinator. I've been an intern. I've been a buyer's agent, a listing agent, manager, principal broker. Prior to working at Dutco Reagan, I was the principal broker at Redfin in Virginia and the market manager there. Before that, I was at another local team, Debbie Dilroll Associates, as a buyer's agent. And then before that, my first job in real estate was at Chorus Homes Realty, which was sort of one of the first real estate technology companies. And that was back in 2003 when that wasn't really a thought. So I've done just about everything. And then I do a lot of things locally with our association. I volunteer there wherever I can to help out. Currently, I'm the chairperson of the grievance committee. I've been on the board of directors. So I try to be kind of a well-rounded real estate leader at this point in my life.
Dude, good grief. Like sometimes I'm feeling like, God, I do so much in real estate and that resume just made me sleepy. Like that was impressive. So you've definitely kept busy. And you know what's interesting, I think some of our listeners may have picked up on it too, is just how diverse your experience is. So I'm super excited about just kind of breaking into this and having a good conversation because your perspective, I think, is so valuable from just the plethora of activities you've been a part of in this business. And I think a big one, if I had to guess, I think some people are going to have some questions about that Redfin tenure. So I'd love to jump into that at some point during our show. But before that, how'd you get into real estate? Like what made you start with that tech firm originally? How did it get on your on your radar? And like, what's your background and story into getting into real estate?
Yeah, so I wish it was more inspirational than it probably is. I am not a morning person. And so I was slinging car parts at Volkswagen Subaru in Springfield for many years. And I worked at Track Auto in high school, which has been out of business for years. But that was one of the best jobs I ever had. But so I wanted to find a job where I didn't necessarily have to wake up early. I didn't mind working until 5 o'clock in the morning, but I didn't want to have to wake up at 5 o'clock.
Right.
And I liked houses. When I was in high school, I used to drive around and look at houses. I mean, in between all the other cool things I was doing. So real estate resonated with me. I left the car dealership. I went to school. I started going to school and just kind of jammed down that path of real estate and was fortunate to get that opportunity with Chorus as an intern. And candidly, it probably molded me to be interested in Redfin because that was an employment job. That was, I think they provided healthcare. I can't even remember. But so my foundation in real estate was not the go do it yourself, be an entrepreneur. It was work at a real estate company. So that's how I got into it. And then I fell in love with it for a multitude of reasons. I think each, you know, if you were to divide up my career into, you know, quarters per se, it's kind of like the first 4 years I was just learning and understanding the business and understanding clients' needs and understanding how to win, you know, competitive situations and appreciating what leverage is. And then in the second half was probably enhancing my legal knowledge and understanding the contract and really what the laws of Virginia were. And then kind of in my third phase, it was the economics of real estate, and just how all those things are, you know, intertied together. And then sort of in this fourth quarter, it's really been leadership and growth and seeking opportunities and looking for threats for individual real estate companies.
Interesting. Yeah, that's it's fascinating that it's, again, been so dynamic, but because you've done so much, I'd love for you to speak to what are you most passionate about out of, like, you know, driving around all these different paths in your real estate career. What's the thing that you enjoy the most? What facet of the business?
So it all depends on the day, but I think what I really appreciate is solving people's problems. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's dealing with a messy, you know, family property. And he's like, you know, at some point I should be paying you for this. And I'm like, listen, you've got a hard problem that doesn't involve selling real estate or buying real estate right now. I just want to help you solve the problem, right? Well, at some point you'll need to buy or sell real estate and I will be there and then you can pay me. But in the meantime, like, let's sort of wade through the noise and find out what the actual problems are and what the fixes are.
Yeah, I like that. You know, it's funny. I was having this conversation literally like an hour or so ago in a coaching appointment, and I got a very similar response to that. And that particular agent was passionate about is the problem solving aspect of the business. And just by going in and having a focus of being a problem solver, a lot of really good things can come from that. Right? If you help solve other people's problems, they will remember that you cared, right? That you made a priority out of something that was a priority to them, and you helped them overcome a difficult place in their life. Those are things that people hold on to for a really long time, and that's really how you can start kind of building those client for lives, the relationships and things. And so that's awesome that that's something that you two kind of have enjoyed doing. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, at the end of this problem solved, a transaction is going to take place. It's how can I help enough people and solve enough problems, which is pretty cool. Yeah, go ahead.
It all comes out in the wash. You know, that's how I feel about it. And but yeah, so I think that just solving problems in general is what is appealing about real estate. I always tease that instead of the normal CE that we all have to do, we should all have to buy or sell our own personal home every 2 years so that we remember what our folks are going. I know you just kind of went through this. I went through it about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a reminder of like, oh, nothing is easily sold as far as real estate goes. Almost everything has a little nuance to it.
Right.
And to remember that, oh yeah, you still got to go to work. Everybody's still got to go to school. The dogs have got to go outside, you know, that there's all those nuts and bolts that are still happening. So.
Oh man, with my move, and we just finally got settled in. We moved about a week and a half ago. For me, you know what the most stressful part of that move was, and it was really eye-opening to me, just because of how I'm wired. Changing all of my addresses. Like, I yesterday or 2 days ago bumped into my principal broker, and he was like, how'd the move go? I was like, good. He's like, did you change all your licenses? Did you change your addresses? You know how you're supposed to do that in 30 days. And I was like, here I am, managing broker, hadn't changed any of my addresses. So the next thing I'm doing, I'm all the websites, I'm trying to change them. I thought I had checked all the boxes. It just never ended, right? All my businesses, I had to change the addresses for my tax purposes and quarterly estimate, all of this stuff. It was just very overwhelming and super time intensive, and nobody makes it easy. I had to pick up the phone for almost every address change I made, had to verify IDs, had to look up information I didn't have. It was annoying. And that's just a super small fraction of the process in moving and in real estate. And so I think we do lose sight of that a lot of times, just kind of getting into the grind on things. So yeah, definitely true. A question I have for you, and I think some of our listeners may want to know, what type of production did you see when production was your predominant focus in real estate? So like what type of volume did you do? What was your experiences with that? You mentioned you were specifically a buyer's agent on that one team. Tell us a little bit about that.
So when I was a buyer's agent on the Debbie Dobrel team at Long and Foster, I did between 15 and 25 a year. Almost all buyers. I don't count referrals or anything, to the listing side. When I was a Redfin agent, I did anywhere between 45 and 65 a year.
Buy side only?
No, there I could be ambidextrous. I could do whatever I wanted, kind of. We didn't do a lot of listings, but I probably did, 10% were listings.
Got it.
And then here now at Duck O'Regan, I've since I help friends and family for the most part, but I was actually kind of impressed with myself. So I started with Duck O'Regan in September. And so I think I've had 18 under contract or closed since September. So, I still got it. I tell that to my former colleagues who think I was just a mouthpiece. I can still sell some houses.
There you go. I like it. Now, that was the direct sales side of things, but you've got quite an extensive management and supervision resume here. How many transactions have you overseen as a managing broker, supervising broker, principal broker in a leadership role? How many transactions have you overseen?
I got to check my LinkedIn. I think it's about 8,000. And it's about $8,000, 8,000 transactions, buy side, sell side. And then for $3.2 billion.
Good golly. That is.
So I like to be able to say that. But.
That's a staggering number. I'm getting heart palpitations thinking about everything that has to go in to 3.2 billion and 8,000 transactions. Oh my. Whew.
With no violations or complaints. I think that's the thing I take probably the biggest pride in.
No, not one violation or complaint against the brokerage for those 8,000 units. Dude, that's unheard of. What do you attribute that to? How that doesn't accidentally happen?
Well, I had support. I had smart people helping me with. So I wasn't necessarily okay. So at any number of brokerages, right? There's 200 to 300 agents running around doing 180 to 250 different things. Mm-hmm. And so a supervising broker's responsibility in that capacity is they're pulled in a billion different directions. So when I was in that role, I had a marketing department that was a real estate marketing department. So familiar with compliance. I had, whenever we had legal issues, if they came up, I had access to company attorneys. So I was fortunate to have support. I think that helped. But I tried to take some of the hard parts or the places where we would, an agent can be exposed, putting in information into like an agreement where they aren't the source of that information. So I was proud of myself when I was there building out the listing agreement so that there were functionalities to it that the agents would input, that they had firsthand knowledge about listing dates, price, term of the agreement, et cetera. And then giving the customer the information that, if anything, our agent was transposing it. So conveyance, where everything gets messy, conveyance items, HOA fees, mortgage balances, et cetera. So put that to the person who actually was the source of that information instead of leaning on the agent to transpose a number or to add, 30 ceiling fans when there really was 3 or whatever. So I think that helped a lot because our listing team was growing pretty significantly at the time. So I think in general, just, I also advocate, we're doing the right thing. So if we're doing the right thing, then usually the rest of the minutia, the rest of the details shakes out. And I think you would be hard pressed to find an individual that was under my brokerage that would say that I didn't live that value in addition to saying it. Yeah. So, if it was the right thing to do, that's what we're going to do. Yeah. And so I think that matters because I think a lot of times brokers are frequently also sales managers and recruiters, which I had those roles too, but you're pulled sometimes in a profit direction because you have to be. So I for good or bad. This may hurt me for jobs later on. They're like, guy doesn't care about profit. No, I care about profit to a fault, but I also think if you do the right thing, then again, everything comes out in the wash. You get paid in spades on that.
I think something you said that could easily be missed by our listeners is you emphasized doing it right. But I think a lot of times doing it right is not the easy route. It's the hard route. Do you have I just love stories. I'm a stories person. I think this really can exemplify, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot. This wasn't in our list of questions. So just kind of rapid fire, and let's see how Rob handles it. But do you have a story that exemplifies that specific way that you approach these challenges in real estate, the doing it right, which a lot of times is the hard way, that could really kind of show our listeners what it is that kind of makes you who you are and how you tackle things as a leader? Any story stand out in mind that you could use as an example?
I have years, right? There may be a longer term strategy that people aren't aware of, but the loyalty to the mission of a company that you're in is critical to me. I mean, candidly, this isn't my story. This is Corey Dutko's story, but one of the reasons I came to this company, besides knowing these guys, we started at Debbie's. We didn't start together, but they say I trained them. I did not. I don't fall for that. I wish I could be responsible for their amazing success. But I remember when Corey was starting to do flips on a fairly, production level skill. And I remember he asked me to come to one of his properties, and he was replacing I think it was a drain line on a house, from like the house to the curb kind of thing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I was like, was it bad? And he was like, no, but it's the right thing to do. And like, I mean, this was probably 6 years ago. And I just kind of like, that has always stuck with me of like, here's a person who put profit over the right thing. This is the right thing to do. This is the thing that they're not going to inspect for, competitive market. They'll be lucky if they're going to inspect it at all. Wow. And he put, let's call it 12 grand on the line for that, down the line. Those are the type of people I love to be in business with. That's the type of like, it's the right thing to do. That's why we did it. There's no other reason. It's the right thing to do. So
I think some people lose sight of the fact that in this industry, we only have our reputation in a lot of instances. Our license doesn't really necessarily set us apart from our peers in real estate. We're not what we do, how we go about the transaction or the facilitation of a transaction is very similar, from one agent to another, because we have standard forms and things like that. But how you can really set yourself apart is by doing things like that. And I think that type of reputation, you almost can't even put a value to it. And that speaks volumes. I love that because, it's not just that you're saying it, you obviously live that. It's a very core value to who you are and how you run your business. And the thing I think I would take from that as well to kind of apply to the production side is your story that you gave of disassociating with the or one of the top producing agents within your company because they maybe didn't follow that same core value is something that our agents who are in production should think about strongly when they're working with clients. There are clients we should work with and there's clients we shouldn't work with. And if they don't align, if you have a client and let's just use your core value of doing it right, even if that's the hard thing and that's what you do, I think there are agents that may look at it and goes, I don't want to lose the transaction because my sellers may be doing some semi-shady things. And in reality, if you really are truly living those core values, that's a no-brainer. Nope, done. I think you're better served with another agent to walk away from it, to kind of make that parallel. So that's impressive.
For sure. Go ahead.
No. I was going to pivot. Go.
Well, I was just going to say, I think I've been fortunate that you encounter this regularly. I mean, I think the real estate population, the realtor population, I could speak to locally. I have some nuances of the national world, but for the most part, you find that. I mean, I'm thankful that I'm in an industry, even though, because it's easy to be a pundit. I think we don't necessarily have the greatest reputation as a group of professional practitioners, but I mean, we being in the weeds see it all the time. The people who, it's sort of a joke, but I don't think it is. Like my wife and I, when I was in production, those years, we never were in a car where I wasn't on the phone. You know, that's what life was.
Yeah.
And when we made this conversion, so to speak, where I would be back in production a bit, you know, we talked about that, if that was okay. And my wife, she's such a trooper. She was like, yeah, if this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing, you know? So, you know, I think we're fortunate that even though people don't get to see every single effort, because that would be another full-time job in itself.
For sure.
24 hours in a day, that most of the people we interact with and work with on a professional level do have that mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, agree. And support's super important. You just brought up your wife and having the support there. I know there's not a chance. There's not even a hope or a prayer that I would be where I am today if I didn't have the support of my wife. And, you know, I even said that in a podcast a few episodes back, and just talking about that support is so critical, because if you don't have the support at home, it's really hard to do what you need to do at work. If your goals aren't in alignment, things like that. So I love that. Now, a thing I do want to, I kind of want to jump into this a little bit, because I really do think that there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of fear, anxiety in the marketplace around disruptors. And I think Redfin would fall into that category as a disruptor. And it's disruptor, I think, sometimes is synonymous with just different models.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a nebulous idea.
Yeah. So you tell us about your journey with Redfin. You know, how it started, why it started, you know, what you did, what you accomplished, and then how and why it ended. And then ultimately give us your breakdown of the business model as Redfin currently operates. I know that was a lot, so we can piece it up too.
Yeah, so it can easily tell you how I ended up going there. So I had been, you know, I would say I was fairly successful. I was the number 2 buyer agent sales wise 1 year. But I got to this one transaction. I mean, it's almost like, you know, it's like how World War I started, right? There's this like moment, and then all the things kind of change from that. So I had this transaction. I've been working with this person for 14 months, had meetings about investing in property. We finally got under contract. And then during the home inspection phase, which was a pretty breezy home inspection, this was back in the day when the home inspection contingency kind of had this clause that said, you submit your request and then you wait for the buyer or the sellers to respond. I was representing the buyer. You wait for the seller to respond. And then if no one responds after that, then the contract becomes void, right? Now it's a little tighter. So you had these periods of time you had to wait. Anyways, during the seller's response, which was pretty reasonable, but they countered on something modest, my client got sued. I don't know the outcome of it or whatever, but she was like, I'm not going to be able to buy a house. I'm not going to be able to, and this was like a big, you know, this was a 900K house in 2010. And I remember I walked around, we lived in a condo in Falls Church at the time. And I remember walking around the building like 8 times, like just to like, I wasn't like heated. Obviously things happen in people's lives, but I was kind of like, well, that was my big sale. And now I got nothing through no fault of my own. And I just kind of was like, okay. And then I went to one of my really good friends' bachelor party, and it was like a week-long thing. And it's probably like the first like out-of-town thing I'd done since my first year in real estate, because I'd lost a client while we were on a company trip that I'd been working with for an extended period of time. So I had always been like a little bit, you know, once bitten, twice shy. So anyways, I remember being there, and all my friends were focused on the bachelor party, and I was still glued to my phone and email and things like that, right? And so I got back, and I had known somebody who had been one of the founding members in Virginia, and so I just reached out to her and kind of started the process then. And so I arrived there probably with some misplaced expectations of I'll have this super flexible life or whatever. But, you know, at the end of the day, it was the right place for me to be for a period of time, because it was very support filled. I was, you know, gosh, so it's 2011. So I was probably like 28 or 29, had no health insurance, didn't really care, but like probably needed it. And so I kind of equate it to this, right? Like for the people who feel one way or another about disruptors or Redfin agents or whatever you want to call them, is that you don't, I think the stat is something like 80% of real estate agents are on a team nationwide, right? So, okay, Redfin's a team. If you want to call it that, then it starts to sound a little more normal, right? Or, frequently you'll hear, they're part-timers or whatever. But there are some agents who do it with flexible scheduling. They're typically showing houses or hosting open houses or doing all those other things. That's their choice. We've got a lot of part-timers in this business too. You wouldn't give grief because your general practitioner doesn't own a hospital, right? Or doesn't own their own medical practice, Right. And so I think in our real estate world, there's a lot of room for, not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Some people like houses. Some people like negotiating. Some people, all the facets that you're probably interviewing, experienced agents, leaders, and people in this business are saying that their reason for doing this job is different. So I think it appeals to different people, or maybe people at a different spot in their life. But what I find always the most interesting about the fear surrounding that organization is that they're not really that secretive about anything.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people jump to conclusions on what something might mean. I don't know if you saw today, they just released a press release that they've partnered with Open Door. Yeah. So they're still doing Redfin now, which is their iBuyer program. And now you can get a quote in some markets honestly, it came out, we're meeting at noon. It came out at like 11:55. I didn't even get to read the whole thing, so I can't speak eloquently about it, but there's a partnership, right? So I never felt like, and I still don't feel like, and full disclosure, I have stock in the company, et cetera, but I have stock in EXP and I have stock in other real estate companies too, but that they were ever trying to eliminate the real estate agent. I think honestly, the goal or the ambition of the company, which is something as agents, we probably should all be supportive. They want to make real estate more transportable. We always think of it as this pretty liquid asset for consumers. It is an investment. It is where they live. But, we've all had a seller who sat on the market for 6 months.
Sure.
We've all had somebody who wants to move, but they're more interested in moving to where they want to go than getting out of where they are. And so I think if you can think of that as a company that wants to make real estate slightly more portable and see how that impacts the rest of the industry, right? So obviously iBuyers is not something they invented, but that's come out of the woodworks. And now
Sure.
other major brands are trying to have an iBuyer program. It's been around forever. If we can't sell your house, we'll buy it. I'm sure there's folks at your company who do it. There's folks at our company who do that.
Yep.
And I think in a lot of cases, that's happening on, this infinitesimal amount of transactions, but you're doing it so that you can make properties more portable. So I think in general, a lot of everyone's holistic idea about real estate as a business are to make it easier for consumers is through these options. So I look at it that way. And then I think the world of most of the folks I worked with, they're as hardworking as any one of us out in the world. They don't get weekends off or nights off. They're still grinding it out. They have showing agents, which again has become sort of a popular model. When I worked at Chorus in 2003, almost every phone, it's funny, we would get these phone calls at Redfin in a way too from other agents, but almost every phone call from another agent would go, I don't know how your teams work. Because we were a team, and that was not necessarily in vogue in 2003. And it was kind of the same thing. Well, now, the showing agent model is a helpful model.
Yeah.
All right. Whether or not Redfin pioneered it, they certainly perfected parts of it.
Sure.
But yeah, so I think in general, when people have a fear of it, it's all right, go to their site, hit the submit button. You might get a call from one of their agents, but in general, you're going to get the riot act on exactly what they're trying to do,
right?
With their business. So I don't know if there was 11 questions in there. So I think
There was. So progression to principal broker. How did you end up in that role? And then ultimately the sunsetting on your time with Redfin.
Yeah. So stupidly, because I didn't read everything, when I first got into this business, and I went to Northern Virginia Community College and did my real estate classes there. And I took almost all the classes to become a broker, not realizing you needed 3 years of experience. So they were kind of warehouse for a while, but I got into this with the idea that I think that's where I want to be. That's the kind of the most senior license. That's what I wanted. And then the opportunity just through, I mean, you would probably have to talk to my bosses, but I think fairly early on, it became clear that I was interested in being a leader within the company. I used to always call it leadership.
Yeah.
Like anybody who won't have to pay to be a leader, awesome. So I think I showed that pretty early on, and then moved through, there are a couple different layers of middle management. There were team leads at the time. So, you have 4 or 5 agents in a specific area. And then there was a thing called an area manager, which, take a couple team leads, throw them together, and then they've got an area manager. And then there was the market manager, which was just like it sounds like. So at the time once I became a market manager, I had Northern Virginia, I had Richmond, which I had started, and then I had Hampton Roads, which I restarted as my markets. And then as time went on, I mean, I think at my peak, I had almost 200 associate agents, so independent contractor real estate agents under my license, and then about 120 employees, and let's say 99% of them had their license. So I had the principal broker responsibility and the profit responsibility, and it was a lot, self-admittedly. And so I think as time went on, my market had to split, and I found that for me personally, I thrived more in the 250 people running around with your head cut off better than I did in the half that or, a third of that. And, I'd been there for 8 years, give or take. And I really felt like I had the same boss for 8 years, and he had the same boss for 10 years. And I kind of felt for a long time in 2018 that, because my wife had a kid, so I had a lot of time to think. I was on paternity leave, and I kind of felt like I was in the way of a lot of people getting their next job. And so I felt comfortable when I went on my paternity leave that, fundamentally speaking, everything kind of worked the way it was supposed to, and the coverage was right. And I came back from that with a bit of a clarity of like, maybe this is that signal that it's time to let other people have an opportunity to grow in this organization, and give me a time to do something a little bit, it's not different. I didn't go to selling submarines, but do something a little different. So Ducko Reagan, Corey and Sean and I talked, and, they wanted to grow as a company. And I had that experience of, being a part of a growth company. And so it just seemed to kind of harmonize. So I had a really nice kind of day that I quit, and worked out, kind of buttoned up everything, and left, and still talk to people, and still, see them from time to time, and still think highly of them. But it's good. It's funny. I don't know if you know this, but so my new office is the building across the street from my old office. So from time to time, I'll just get a text message, and I'll hear somebody, Rob, from the 5th floor of my old building. So, I still see him from time to time. So it's still it's a nice relationship, I think.
That's good. I mean, it seems like you kind of went into that experience positively, and it ended on a fairly positive note. You still have those relationships, and that's always, if you can make something a win-win during a transition, I think that's important. It's kind of what we do in real estate, try and make it a win-win. That being said, I'd love to get your take, your honest assessment. What are the strengths of Redfin, if you could summarize it concisely, and where do you think they fall short? because I think a lot of people don't understand who these more traditional brokerages or agents, how to compete, because they look at it, oh, they offer a lot of services, they have the ability that their size is there, they have funding, they have these things. So how do you compete against them? And so what would be your estimate of that? You got to see it very, very closely. You're now working for a competitor. Sure. How would you coach a newer agent or an agent unfamiliar with the business model of Redfin to compete?
Well, so I think so the things they do well is their technology. They're exposed to a lot of volume, so they do get to experience a lot of real estate business. Mm-hmm. They have that support, from a transaction coordinator, not undifferent from a lot of our own models. The cons are hard. I think, so on my team right now, we are 11 people, I think. And we have 2 showing agents, and, we're on a smaller scale by absolute certainty. But if you worked with us, there's 100% chance you're going out with your buyer's agent or their showing agent. And I think if there's a potential frustration that some people could have in that experience, and I've heard this from friends who have used the service, is they may not meet their actual deal writing agent until they're writing an offer. And sometimes that can be hard to connect. And some of those things may have changed, but this was the experience one of my closest friends had, and he had heart palpitations to tell me that he had found another company to work with. And I was like, it's okay. It's fine. So there's that. And then you might, when you're going out and seeing houses, you may be going out with different people every time. So you may have to recycle telling your kind of origin story of why you're looking for real estate. So that could be frustrating for people, for consumers out there in the world. So I think, how do you overcome that? If you do have an intimate real estate team, you talk about that. You talk about what the experience really is going to be like. A lot of the resources that we all have, I will say, and this is no slight on anyone, and I certainly would welcome a challenge, but I don't think there's anyone that has the technology that they have by a large margin. I think they are the industry leader in that regard. Mm-hmm. And I've now been privileged to experience the lots of different, we're currently going through some conversions on our own side at my company, and KW in general is really focused on technology, but theirs is pretty precise. So I think in general, if you're an agent, you're staying connected with your people, you're being a human being when you talk to them. And if you're trying to compete, and I've told this to our own team, is that you don't necessarily have to get into the weeds on what you perceive they might do or not do.
Sure.
Is to simply elevate all the things that you will do, and then actually follow through on what you do. Say what you mean what you say, and do it. Because when I was a buyer's agent, this is irregardless of companies, people were most impressed with me when I said, okay, I'm going to get you X tonight by close of business, and I did it. Yeah. That impressed them more than the content of what I, prepared for them or anything I did going forward. So, so do that. I mean, that's how you combat it. I wish I had a more like, here's the needle in the haystack type of answer, but the reality is that that's a business model that will appeal to certain people.
Well, I think you wouldn't have stayed for 8 years with the organization if you didn't fundamentally think they were doing things right more than they were doing things wrong. I was just curious because you obviously have a perspective that's very different from most of our I would say all of our listeners. And so that's just an interesting.
Well, and I mentioned their transparency. I mean, if you really want to dig into the nuts and bolts, take a look at their customer reviews. You can sort them by star count, just like you would on an Amazon product. So if you really want to see what a customer who had a challenging experience, click on the 2-star reviews and take a look and see what they really are. And, use the client's own words if you have to talk about it. But like they're out there.
Yeah.
They're not trying to hide or keep that information secret, or, it's something we do. We survey at Ducko Reagan. We send them a Zillow survey, whether or not we perceived it was going to be a good transaction or a bad transaction. So they do that with every customer. That's their commitment.
Awesome. So I don't want to stay with our eyes in the rearview mirror the whole time. I'd love to hear more about the Rob Whitman of today, what he's doing, what his day-to-day looks like, where your focus is, and what your future looks like.
Yeah. So my day-to-day is changed a little bit recently, where again, I'm kind of less focused on client interactions. I'm more working towards this. I feel like crass saying it this way, but my long-term goal will be trying to secure sort of bigger accounts, if you will, for Ducko Reagan. So that will be my client interaction, and so those will manifest in different ways. We've got some secret ideas on that, and
nice.
then my day-to-day right now, I kind of mentioned it, is I'm pretty glued into kind of getting some of the technology that we've been using that is not the KW technology, but this will be a good preparation for the future as we do transition to KW Command, is updating some of our processes within the CRM we're using so that it makes more sense to our team. I've been here now long enough to kind of witness how they actually use the product. So I've been working with a product engineer to update that, and we just got kind of the first release on Tuesday. So I'm playing with that now. And then in general, we're looking at other lead sources. We're trying to play red light, green light with how business happens, because I think, and maybe you've witnessed this yourself, but I definitely have noticed, you see buyers out looking, parked in front of a real estate sign. They're not so much calling anymore off of those signs, and, certain municipalities are making it harder and harder to put out signs. So you're not getting those same sign calls that used to be the bread and butter for a lot of real estate agents. Sure. They're going on their phones. So it's always, to me, just like ingrained in my head of, the couple sitting in their car at dusk, seeing a real estate sign, and you can see the glow from their phones on their faces. So we're experimenting with some of those things, and then working through the conversion process. So a lot of my job, in a sense, at this new role is the trial and error, and getting us to a place where our director of operations can implement more perfectly some of the processes that I think will save our team time and make sure we don't lose out on opportunities, or we don't follow up with people the right way, and that we're having worthwhile content. So.
Gotcha. I love that. So with your team, what makes your team, the team now, what's their production look like, units, volume? You said you have 11 members. Tell us a little bit about that. And then ultimately, what are kind of those core business funnels you guys focus on right now that are working well for you? I think people would like to know kind of how the makeup of your guys' team is.
How the sausage is made.
That's
so we're simple people. In a lot of ways, I'm probably adding the complex, weird fruits to our smoothie. But, our business is open houses, repeat business, referrals, and investors. So one of
that's it. Those three things is like.
Those are our four pillars. I mean, there's little pieces in between. If somebody comes to us, we'll help anybody who comes to us. But with that said, that is typically our focal point, because we have a pretty unique experience with investors. We've made them lots of money over the years. It's been a focus of Corey and Sean Reagan and Corey Ducko. They have an investment company. We do 10 to 14 projects a year under another company. We source properties off market. Not a lot of people know this, but like pre-MLS Nova, pre-MLS DC, that's my Facebook group. So that's 5,000 members of.
Jeez. Oh, wow.
Shout out to Frank Yosa, one of my favorites in this business. But
yeah, he's over frankly MLS, right?
We try to source a lot of stuff off market. We're also trying to aggregate. Again, this is where you can use technology to your advantage, which is we try to aggregate all the other places in the world that coming soons are coming
right.
from, and put them into one place for our team to easily search and access them. Because if you ask me what's the biggest change we'll experience in real estate, it's funny. It's like Groupon. I always am like, isn't that Valpak? Aren't those Valpaks just like on a computer?
Yep.
But is that a lot of real estate will trade offline.
Yeah.
So outside of the MLS, for whatever reason, a lot of times it is not in the customer's best interest to do that because they lack exposure. But there is a significant pile of people who the house could sell, but we're not ready to show it.
Right.
Help some folks. They've got 2 little ones. We're going to do some things to the house if they moved out. Well, so we did a few kind of neighborhood, not advertised open houses. A buyer walked through the door. They ended up buying it, gave them a free rent back, closed at the price they wanted, no appraisal, blah, 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 like all those wonderful stories that agents like to tell. That was in their best interest. They did get top dollar. They did get the terms they wanted, and they didn't have to, get out of the house for, 48 hours for the first weekend, on a hot listing, or weird dinner times, So anyways, I think that's what we're going to see. So I think agents who are equipped to know the off-market properties or how to source them are the ones who will be the leaders in this business, in this personal business.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's a really good take, and I don't even think we've really touched on it on this show. Is just having access to that off-market stuff further advances the value of you as an agent. I love that. I couldn't agree more, because there are a lot more properties moving off-market than on-market. No, I mean, I'm sorry, but there's more moving on-market than off-market, but there are a lot more than in the past moving off-market. So it's definitely a trend we're seeing. What type of volume with those pillars that Ducko Reagan team are doing? What's their volume been year to date and maybe in 2018? What does that look like? I mean, what kind of success are you guys seeing? Just very simply, kind of those 3 or 4 areas of focus.
Yeah, so 2018. So when I say 11, that includes our amazing support team. We have marketing assistants. We have listing manager. We have director of operations. So we are support heavy, because that's been our model, is that Corey and Sean kind of took away what they liked about the first team that we were all on together, what they didn't like, and said, all right, well, if we put our name on the sign, we can kind of do it the way that we think is the perfect way.
Right.
So we're very support heavy for our team. But so last year we did 150 buy and sell in investments with 3 buyers agents and 1 listing agent. So we did 150 with 4.
150 with 4. Jeez,
practicing agents. Yeah.
It's and like so, over 30 units an agent. I mean, see that if you ask me, right? People ask me all the time. They're like, and they'll name drop specific teams. And then, I'm like, okay, well, how big's their team? Oh, they have 25 agents on their team. Okay. How many of them are actually like agents practice? Oh, there's 20 of them. Okay. What was their production? Oh, they did 300 transactions. I'm like, they had 20 agents, and you start averaging out these numbers, and it all of a sudden very quickly dilutes. It's like, okay, if each, and I don't even know what the math is on, what is that, 3, 5, 10, 15. So they're averaging between 10 and 15 transactions per person, per team member. That's not as impressive to me as 4 licensed agents practicing doing 100. That's over 30 units per person. That's impressive.
Yeah. And so this year we're tracking a little bit. I say behind because we probably made a big goal for this year. But so we just surpassed the 100 deal mark, under contract or closed. and we've got a decent pipeline. But part of it is we deal with investors, so those deals come when they come. This year, the inventory crunch that also hits investors too, right?
Sure.
So when we help an investor find a good value, we're, depending on the scope, obviously, we're 6 weeks to 9, 12 months if it's a tear down and new construction,
right,
from actually having a product to sell again on their behalf. So the first couple of, and this was such a strange year, I think, for the local agents, we are easy to forget the economic impacts of different things that affect our business profoundly, right? I remember years ago, sequestration had this transformative impact in 2015. I think it was passed in the end of 2013, but the hits really came to our area in 2015, and you started to slow down. So the government, so November, crappy interest rates. December and January, government shutdown. We can't walk around or shake somebody's hand without being one connection away from a contractor, a government contractor, a government person who was impacted by that.
Right.
So when we look back on this year and we say tight inventory, I think one thing we're going to forget about is, and December, when the deals for January are happening, and January when the deals for February are happening, there was a universal uncertainty as to, again, just think about this. This is like Great Depression era story type thing. There were food lines locally because, it's hard to keep a savings in this area on two incomes. So I'll be interesting. I think what we're doing as a company is rebounding really nicely for the second half of the year.
Nice.
So I do think we'll still get pretty close to our goal, which is 215. And I think in the meantime, we're going to look at bringing on some more agents that might be interested in pursuing that buyer agent role for us. And so 150 last year, the goal is 215. We're halfway there, and we're 15 behind.
What's the volume on that? Just because I know you guys are a little bit higher price point, or if you don't know the volume, what's the average price point?
I want to say it was 90 mil last year. I have this somewhere handy, but I want to say it's like 120. But let's see.
What's your average price point? Do you know?
It's usually 600K. Yeah.
600K. Okay, so that's a decent average.
Yeah, we benefit. We're primarily Arlington, Alexandria, Falls Church, and Fairfax. 130, 129 is our goal.
Cool, awesome, I like it. All right, so obviously you've been incredibly successful. Management, director of growth, sales, product. You've done it all, which I love. So I think you're full of wisdom and advice that I would love to, with our last couple minutes here, crack into a few more questions. First question I have is, of the last three, I should say, is what's the biggest mistake? And you've touched on some mistakes in this episode. What do you think the biggest mistake the agents in today's market and moving forward are making that are keeping them from the success that they could find?
All right. So this is a generalization. So if you're not a part of this, ignore it. But I think what has been most surprising to me coming back into production. So keep in mind, I kind of was vacant from production for 4 years, and I have a way I like to do business, is how little people call the listing agent when they want to write an offer. That has been shocking to me. That, again, I kind of talked about these quarters of my real estate career and figuring out the leverage or where you can make a deal or whatever. So many of these offers we get, it's like, well, if a phone call came in, we didn't want to close in 15 days. Like, that's cool. But like, if you can't do a rent back, we got nowhere to go.
Right.
So that's probably been the most shocking thing to me. So if there's, and this is, I feel like simple advice. If you are texting or I think you can give a text to an agent to say, hey, I'd like to give you a call to talk about an offer. That's okay.
Sure.
That's respectful of everyone's time. But if you're just texting and my folks like it and we're going to submit an offer and you're not checking in, that's a problem. One thing I would love to, I've been an advocate of this for a long time, and I'd just love to see more people do it. We have this really amazing tool through our association in that we have a contingency and clauses contract, addendum to the contract that allows for backup contracts. So if you're out there, we've got multiple offers on umpteen things. The national stat is this: 1 in 6 contracts fall apart. And that works out pretty close locally. So it's old data for me, but we used to run these numbers. And so if you think about that, 15% fall through.
It's actually, I did this read. It's like 14% in the DMV.
Yeah.
14% fall. Yeah.
So there's a 1 in 6 chance. And if you're working with buyers and you're working, I mean, how many of them live in doubt that there actually was multiple offers?
Mm-hmm.
Or how many of them live in doubt as to thinking something nefarious has happened where, oh, well, they probably sold it to their cousin. It's like, no, they probably didn't. But so let's start using backup offers when we lose. One, it helps everybody. I mean, I had the biggest multiple offer situation I've ever had in June. And I mean, I've been doing this for 14 years through, the downward cycle, the upward cycle, and we had 20 offers. And so we got through all that. We took the top 4 and we said, you didn't get accepted. We're interested in entertaining a backup offer. There's no risk to you. I think a lot of people don't actually even know that your buyer client can withdraw it at any point in time. There's no deposit they need to put forth. So go looking for houses on this 1 in 6 chance that it falls through. Like, you might be a hero and you don't have to renegotiate. Your seller doesn't get stigmatized because they went back on the market. So that's a piece of advice I just offered to the whole world. We just had a situation where the buyer got cold feet. Well, thank God we had a backup contract because we didn't go back on the market. We had it was less. We got $2,000 less than we had gotten from this primary contract. But the primary contract was kind of, it wasn't, they took 24 hours to get back to us in a multiple offer situation. And that kind of threw up a red flag for me. So we were super happy to have that backup. Our clients they could continue moving on their search as a seller. And then this buyer who was like, I'm looking to live in this neighborhood. So anyways, if you have a multiple offer situation, offer that backup opportunity. These buyers need to know what the story is. And there's a chance it could fall apart and you get to be a hero. So that's unsolicited wisdom, I guess, in a way.
I love that because I think there's agents out there that have written more than 6 contracts and not gotten them and not done a backup offer. In this market, it can be wild, especially in the areas where you guys work. And just think, statistically, the odds are on their side. You write 6 offers, make them all backups, you're going to end up with one. You're gonna get what you need. So there you go. Just play your odds, which is pretty cool. I'm actually really glad you touched on that because it is something that rarely do we see. I mean, as a listing agent myself, rarely do I get a phone call. The number of times I get an email and there's an offer attached, and I'm like, I didn't even know there was one coming. They didn't fill out the feedback. I never heard from them. I'm going through the offer and exactly what you said. I'm like, if they had made a call, I could have saved at least a round of counters because, it's simple changes, but that are necessary. And then the backup offer is a great way to really be a win-win for a lot of people. And you just never know. So I like that. So my second to last question here: what is the best advice you've ever received?
So I was trying to think about this because I feel like I am a life learner, right? You go through these phases, certain things resonate with you, whatever. But probably the one that really flipped a switch for me is Anthony Carr was a salesman. He's still in the business. He works at Remax West End. He's a super funny guy. I had the unfortunate experience of seeing him in the parking lot for the first time of my current office for the first time in like 8 or 9 years. And that morning I had run into Colin Powell in our parking lot and I had stopped to say hi and shake his hand. Anyways, I was like, oh my God, it's so good to see you. You're the second coolest person I've seen in this parking lot today. I felt bad. But Anthony Carr, I don't think he coined this phrase, but he's the first person to expose me to it, which is houses are where the jobs go at night. And that was sage wisdom in 2009, 2008, when it was a buyer's market and there was a surplus of inventory. And that kind of drove me to look at the economic, telltales to say, oh, well, if employment keeps going down, they're going to need somewhere to live. And so this is still a good career for me. So I think that was probably the best sort of like phrase that's just helped me think differently about real estate.
Yeah, I like that. That's pretty cool. I had never heard that either. So definitely a shout out to Anthony Carr. That's a good one. I like it. All right. So our last hard hitting question. This is top agent happy hour. What is, after a long day of being a super broker, director of growth, father extraordinaire, an incredible husband, what is Rob Whitman? What is he drinking at the end of the day? What's his drink of choice?
Well, so I love IPAs.
Okay.
And I don't know why. The only thing that bothers me about this beer company, it's the Founders All Day IPA.
Okay.
An IPA, so you don't have to get completely trashed if you have to. But it comes in a 15 pack, and for whatever reason that bothers me. But that's probably my like drink of choice. Super cold.
Yep.
I avoid hard liquor as much as I can. But yeah, that's probably my drink of choice.
There you go. Well, you're like our founder, Eric Pearson. He is a huge IPA fan, and I am a gigantic weenie when it comes to beverages. So like I shared on my interview, of course, I love my Shirley Temples. An IPA, I think is IPA is the furthest away from a Shirley Temple that you can get.
From time to time, I drink a Shirley Temple, though.
There you go. Can't hate it.
I used to go to Ruby Tuesdays.
That's it.
When I was a kid. So.
I love it. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, to ask you questions, to do business with you, to pick your brain, to basically just reach out and have a conversation, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
All right. So I love LinkedIn. So I'm Rob Whitman on LinkedIn, and I friend a lot of people to learn through osmosis. And I offer this as a sincere statement. I just want people in this industry to have a better experience. So if you do ever need anything or have any questions, or you've got an association ethics issue, I mean, I'm happy to walk through those types of things with you. If not, I'm Rob, R-O-B, at Dutco Reagan. That's DUTKORAGEN.com. But either way, oh, nice. Awesome.
I got the shades, man. I wear these things all the time.
Those are limited edition, baby.
Dude, they're limited edition, and I have them because I cannot keep a pair of sunglasses to save my life. I lose those things constantly. But these I haven't let. They're like lucky. They're my lucky sunglasses, so I wear them all the time. There you go. How to represent. Well, Rob, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your stories, and most importantly, your wisdom. So really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much, and we'll definitely have our folks reach out to you. That was this week's top